So, in your friendships and relationships, who's the asshole, right? Who's the one fucking things up, right? In my relationship with my beautiful girl, Nana, who just showed herself in all her glory, she tends to be the asshole, right? She's the one knocking shit over, terrorizing me, crying that, she wants to go outside, right? So she is definitively the asshole in most of our interactions. Most, not all. In your life, when your friendships are imploding or having problems, or your relationships are imploding or having problems, who's the main culprit, right? Is it you? I mean, in all of your problems, the consistent variable is you, right? I'm not saying it is always you, but if you are having a lot of issues, if you tend to have friendships tank, relationships tank, short-term, long-term, there might be some introspection that we would want to do there. But of course, it could also be the people you're interacting with, right? There is a possibility that a lot of people you meet are assholes. But then there would be another layer to that, which would be your ability to judge character and choose who you're going to attempt to have a friendship with, right? Maybe you're gullible, or oppositely, maybe you're really cynical and you hurt your friendships before you even get into them, right? So there's a lot of different variables and directions this can go in, but the purpose of this video is to, it's housekeeping. It's housekeeping to have you reevaluate what's going on in your life and what has happened in the past, and current friendships and future friendships, right? And this has always been a very helpful tool for me in recording my progress, right? How I am improving or sometimes going backwards when it comes to my social skills, seduction skills, relationship skills, and also my level of self-awareness. And so a video like this is very useful for you to this idea in the video to come back to every once in a while, but definitely right now you want to do an evaluation of what's going on with your dating life or lack thereof, your social life or lack thereof, and then your own relationship with yourself in terms of your honesty and awareness, right? You have to be aware of what's going on in your own mind, but then you also have to be honest about what you're seeing, right? Because you can definitely delude yourself. We have great skill in doing that. It's probably one of our best skills is our capacity for self-delusion. And if you can do this correctly, you're going to improve very fast. Very, 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 very fast. The biggest hindrance to progress, besides lack of action, is not going in the right direction. And this is going to help you find the right direction, right? So we need to find out who's the fucking problem in your friendships and relationships, because there's problems. Obviously, nobody is perfect. So there's a few questions you can ask. One, who's generally starting the shit, right? Who kind of starts the drama and brings up the problems? This isn't an immediate indicator of who's wrong, but it is a smoking gun. It can kind of point us in the right direction. But then we do have to evaluate the actual problems themselves, right? Then we have to look at who is initiating the rejections, the cutoffs, right? Who's the one? Are you the one getting rejected from friend groups or eventually kicked out of friend groups, or you're being dumped, right? This is going to apply both to romantic relationships and friendships, right? Are you the one being dumped or cut off? Who's the one generally bringing up the problems when the friendship or relationship is still there, but problems are being raised? And then, what the fuck is the third one? This is the second time I'm making the video, but I watched the first one and I was just like, I fucking rambled too much and took too long to kind of get off the ground and had a horrible start. So I felt like I'd just fucking rather do it all over again. When was the third part? It was who's the problem? Who's the one cutting off things? And then we'll figure it out. I figured it out. You'll see there was a small jump cut in this video. I'm just splicing two videos together. I paused the video and I was like, I really need to figure this out. I went back and watched the old version and I figured out the third part. So the third part about, I just have so much fucking brilliance, it's sometimes hard to like keep control over it all, right? It just comes out of me. That's what she said. Yeah. Anyways, it's who's bringing the value to the relationship, right? Who's carrying the weight, right? Just like when you're playing multiplayer game and you're carrying your team on your back, or you're the fucking noob and everyone has to carry you, who is providing value to the relationship? And that's also going to tell you who's the problem, because usually there's a lot of different reasons why someone might bring up problems and why someone might cut someone else off, right? And that can be directly tied to who's providing the most value, right? So we have some different, in order to find out who's the asshole, we have a lot of different metrics, right? So here's a couple combinations, right? Let's say that you're the friend who's providing more to the friendship in whatever ways that is true, but a friend cuts you off. Well, one possibility could be that they are jealous or spiteful of you, right? That they're a hater. And if you're consistently improving yourself, so that means generally providing more value, or just being a more valuable person, because we're going to be really upfront here. Some people are better than others, right? There are different sectors by which someone could be better, right? Someone could be worth more money. Now, that doesn't mean they're a better person, but it does mean in that one metric, they are better, right? But then you have to go dive deep. Like, did they get their money in an ethical way, right? Or did they fuck over others, or they're doing something illegal? So there's a lot of variables here, right? But we're just going to be kind of a little bit objectifying ourselves and others just for the sake of argument, right? It could be you're the more social friend, right? So when you guys go out, you're the one who can kind of bring girls, right? Or help them meet friends or meet a girl, because you have the social skills, right? You are bringing that currency of social skills. You could be the more generous friend, right? You're the one who always tends to pick up the tab and da-da-da. Now, that could be because you have more money, right? Like certain friendships that I would have with someone who's just, younger, right? They're in their early 20s and then I'm in my early 30s. I've had time to establish myself a little bit more, so I have more money. Yeah, I'll generally pick up the tab, right? So it's not really a criticism of them, because I was broke when I was fucking my early 20s, right? Dumb college kid. But here's the thing. Even when I was broke, I was still generous, right? I was still the one always kind of picking up the tab, trying my best to be nice and, and provide for others, and loan money when I could, and etc. Right? So we do want to also be strict with our definitions and not give ourselves or anyone else an excuse, because if we're going to honestly evaluate who's the asshole in our relationships, we have to be honest, and that's going to unfortunately require us to be quite critical. So you can see how there's some combinations. Like if you're providing more value, but then you're getting cut off, it could be because people are fucking hating on you, right? Or it could be a one-off situation where you said something really fucking, judgmental or disrespectful, or you guys have differing politics or religion, right? There's a lot of different combinations here. But oppositely, if you're the one getting cut off and the other person generally provides more value, well, it's a possibility that you're the leech. You're the mooch in whatever ways, financially, emotionally, right? You're the friend who's always, calling to talk about his problems, right? So think about when, friends are bitching at each other or bitching to each other. Are you the friend who's generally doing the bitching, the other guy's sitting there being the therapist, right? Vice versa? Or is it kind of an even, right? You guys are sharing issues with each other. When it comes to the giving of advice, right? Are you like the actually useful therapist, not just only listens, but actually gives practical, actionable advice, or vice versa? And then does that advice work, right? So wisdom is also a value that you bring to the table as a friend or as a boyfriend or as a husband, right? So you want to be really evaluating everyone's relative value and ask yourself, who's providing more? Generally, they're not going to be immediately the asshole because they are just providing more. But there is a possibility, of course, someone could be higher value in one. Like, let's just use maybe they are more wealthy, so they're more generous, but they're also kind of an asshole, right? They're kind of judgmental, right? I would honestly, I'll be really honest with you, I actually would fall into that category, right? I generally try to make it seem like more of an inspirational, I want to hold everyone to the highest standard kind of thing, but it 100% could be perceived as me just being the asshole. I'm very aware of that. And so this brings us to another thing. I'm willing to accept that loss. Like, it's a business expense that I'm willing to accept, right? I'm going to lose money. I'm going to rub people the wrong way. And it's one of those, I am who I am. And, I accept it as would I be more palatable and more digestible to more people, more popular, if I wasn't so bombastic? Yes, probably, right? I have proven that in my life in all aspects, right? When I tend to be the more diplomatic kind of political, like, oh, hey, man, da-da-da, just very nice. I don't rub feathers the wrong way. More people tend to like me. When I tend to open my mouth and give my honest opinion, I tend to rub more people the wrong way. But I think that I overall have a more positive impact by kind of showing that side of myself, right? Now, am I always the most skilled at choosing when to show it and when not to? Because then some people kind of have this idea of like, you got to be who you really are, which I don't think actually exists, right? I'll use the phrasing, I am who I am, and I'm not going to change, right? Just for the sake of like, you understand what the fuck I'm talking about. But when we're really getting down to brass tacks about like the philosophical implications of like, well, I am who I am and I'm not going to change, I don't think there really is a true you, right? It's a deeper discussion. But here's one really good example that kind of, I think it tears down any argument like that. Let's say you're a lazy person, just for instance, and you want to be, more active. You want to lose weight. You want to make money, whatever it is that you want to do more in, you will have to put in more effort. Well, in order to put more effort, you have to be less lazy. So that will require you to change. So are you going to change yourself in order to better yourself? If you say, oh, I'm not going to change because I am who I am, that sounds like a pretty fucking retarded argument, right? But then in order to change, you will have to change, which means losing some part of yourself. In this case, your laziness, right? So when we are doing this evaluation of our relationships, if we do figure out that we're the asshole, we have to change. And if you're too stubborn because, I am who I am, well, okay, cool. But you just need to accept that you're going to have some losses, which I personally accept. With this case, I prefer to be the bombastic, really honest guy. Now, I'm always trying to improve, like, when I should be like that and when it's more beneficial to me and others, right? Because deep down, if you're going to be bombastic for the sake of helping others, then the main goal needs to be helping others, not having this personality. Because when most people say I am who I am and I'm not going to change for anyone, what you're really saying is I enjoy acting the way I do. And I would not enjoy as much changing because change can be painful. But if my thesis is that I am this way because I want to help others, and that's my main motive, I do enjoy it, I'm not going to lie, but I need to make my first priority compassion or empathy, then I have to be careful when I do it, right? And you can see this in like the progression of my videos if you've been watching me for a long time. I've been making videos for like fucking 6 years, right? Coming on 7 on a different channel. I started this one not too long ago. But I have like 600-700 videos on the internet, right? You can see the progression in change in the way that I express myself in my videos. My message has kind of always been the same. It's become more refined, but I've changed the way I've said it. And that's going to affect its how palatable it is, right? But for the most part, I'm willing to accept that I am going to be the asshole from that perception. And there are definitely friends of mine, current or former, who if you were to like ask them, hey, what do you think of Hector? They might include, yeah, he's a fucking asshole, right? But usually in my experience, there's an addendum to that. He's an asshole, but actually he means well and he ends up like being really helpful. And I've been told that many times, right? I didn't like hearing the truth from you, but in the end, it was actually more beneficial to me. And you were more of a friend than someone else who didn't call me out or raise those issues, right? So that brings us to we have the 3 metrics. Who is bringing value to the table, and then who's raising the problems, and then who's doing the cutting off, right? The one doing the cutting off is not always necessarily the asshole and not the asshole. You have to look at why they're cutting off, right? And the way you look at why they're ending the friendship, you have to make your best guess given the context, right? So I've seen guys, when they get girlfriends, they tend to fall off the face of the earth. And I've seen it many times, and sometimes it comes as a surprise. It's somewhat understandable because they're just going to have less time, but they also tend to change, right? And so when you start seeing that changing, and then that friend starts hanging out with you less, you have to look at yourself and be like, okay, is it because she doesn't like me, right? So in my single days, I was kind of a player, right? Kind of gross understatement. I had a friend who was married, and I knew his wife. And I knew that once they were like girlfriend and they got serious and got married, I knew that she didn't approve of me because she knew me, right? Very well. And that started to affect our friendship, right? And so I actually ended up cutting him off because I saw it coming and I didn't like how he was changing, right? But I cut him off because I saw the changes that she was making. So in my estimation, right, he was the asshole, right? And the thing that kind of was the last straw for me was him kind of insulting me. And it wasn't the first time. And I was tired of it and I didn't really like it. So I made the judgment he was the asshole. And I think looking back, I still made a good call, right? But there might be a different situation, right, where I cut off one friend because his girlfriend was a dentist and she fucked me over. She was either incompetent and didn't make a correct diagnosis and then did a surgery, or she did and was taking advantage of me. Either way, she was completely wrong and cost me money and a lot of pain. But I ended up cutting him off because I didn't know how to tell him this, right? And I just went, you know what? He's probably not going to listen to me because all of my experience in my past has been when guys have girlfriends, they're going to side with the girlfriend or the wife and not the friend telling the truth. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to avoid this altogether and just cut them both off. But then I eventually reached out to that friend years later, and we've since, been friends again. And he was totally understanding, and he actually told me that I made the right choice. I gave the full story in a different video. I forgot which one. Oh, I think it's the video. It's called like "Be the Friend Who Says the Hard Thing," so you can look that up on this channel. And it's kind of somewhat similar to this, but it's more of like a specific narrowing of that subject. This is a general overview. And so in that case, he didn't really do anything wrong. It was his girlfriend, but I decided to still cut it off overall. So I kind of was the asshole, but again, I had a decent motivation, right? But I really think these things through, and you need to be thinking these things through and then figuring out when you've made the right decision and when you've made the wrong decision, or when you were the victim of the decision, right? Someone cut you off or a girl dumped you, right? This is applying to relationships too. Like, why are you getting dumped? What's the issue? What are they saying is the issue? You have to look at, what she's saying. And then you have to look at, because women don't always, people in general, but women specifically in relationships don't always know why they're breaking up with you. They may have a surface reason, but really there's an underlying reason, which could just be like a loss of attraction, right? This might be like what she's feeling, but really this is like the actual consequence, right? Or vice versa. And so, but you won't know the 100% answer unless you actually know about how attraction works, right? That's where someone like me comes to help, right? Like I can say, you may think it's this, but it was actually this, right? She lost respect for you, or she lost trust for you, or she fell out of love with you because of this, or this. So she says it's this, but it's really all of this included, and this is just one small part of it, and you have to look really deeply to figure out what's going on. So if you're the one getting cut off, you need to evaluate, is this actually, because here's the problem. If you make the wrong judgment and you're going to change and you go, you know what, I was wrong here, I'm going to change. If you're wrong about being wrong and you make changes, they may not be positive. You might have been just fine. She was actually the culprit, or he was actually the culprit. So you have to look at the truth of why someone's getting cut off. And then you have to look at who's generally raising the problems in a friendship, right? So that's when the problems start. the cutoff is like the finale of the problems. It's reached the point of, maximum velocity, or like the event horizon of like a black hole, right? Once you hit that certain point in the black hole, you literally can't get out because even light can't get out. So you're gonna go into the fucking center and turn into Swiss cheese, right? So while you were going towards that event horizon, who was the one bringing up the issues? You have to look at the truth of the issues, because sometimes someone is just a fucking drama queen, but sometimes someone is just the person who says the hard thing. They're the friend who is willing to bring up conflict and not avoid it, right? So in that case, you have to look at, am I generally a conflict avoidant person? Am I afraid of conflict? If the answer is no, then if someone else is bringing up issues, it's not because you're afraid of bringing up conflict, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean you're not the issue as well. Do you see how much nuance there is here, right? There are little hints, right? If I'm afraid of conflict and I'm never bringing up problems, but I feel like there's problems, right? The other person might be the issue, right? Because they just consistently rubbing me the wrong way, and then they're starting drama all the time. But I'm a little bit afraid to like confront them, but they're bringing it up, right? And both people can be wrong too, right? But not no one. If there are problems, it's someone or both. There isn't zero. Even if there's a miscommunication, there could still be one culprit, or you could both be the culprit, right? Like I'll give you an example. I was playing Magic last night. It's a card game, Magic the Gathering, right? I was playing Commander. It's a 4-player variant, so it's very political. I'm not going to explain too much what happened because you might not care, right? But it's a very good social example. Basically, it's me, this guy. We were only in a 3-person pod. And the guy in front of me kept countering what this guy was doing. Basically, he was like, this guy plays a card and this guy plays a card that says, no, you can't do that. It's frustrating when that happens, right? But then there's a third person, me. So I'm kind of sitting there and he keeps countering. He counters him 2 times. And then the other guy says basically like, hey, are you going to know anything about, pointing to me? Like when he starts to play his stuff, are you going to be able to take care of him because you're using all your stuff on me? But the way he said it wasn't like that. That was the message I think he was trying to get across. But the way he said it was like, okay, so are you going to have anything for him? It was a little bit frustrated, which is understandable because you're getting fucked, right? The other guy got a little upset, and his response was, okay, you know what? Never mind. And he just grabbed his cards and left the game, which is, a little dramatic. But then I was like, okay, what's going on? And I tried to, be a bit of a parlay between them. And the one guy got mad because the other guy was like telling him how to play, which I think was a little bit of a dramatization of what was going on. But the other guy who made the statement, his tone was a little bit, it wasn't well chosen, right? It was clearly, he was a little annoyed, and it was just like, are you going to do anything about him? Like, right? It didn't come off like, okay, cool. Hey, you know what? That's a good, because it was actually a good counter, right? Because it would have also screwed his game. It was going to screw both of our games. But he could have chosen the way he expressed himself better, is essentially the point, right? So he could have had a better choice of words, but this guy could have had a little bit more emotional control. His response was a little dramatic, and he ended up confessing that a little bit later when I kind of, talked to him a little bit more. But I would say both people were the problem. I think that the guy who overreacted was definitely more of the problem, but I would say that you don't have to have perfect communication because it's impossible. You literally can't perfectly communicate to everyone. But you can perfectly communicate your intentions and feelings, or close to. You can accurately portray it, right? And because he wasn't controlling the way he was expressing himself, he allowed his emotions to get the better of his communication. This guy took it 5 notches up, but this guy could have done better, right? So if I were to say, like, this guy's like 80% guilty, but this guy's like 20% guilty, right? So when you're looking at all of your problems in your friendships and relationships are going to come down to you saying something or doing something, or emotionally reacting to something, and that person's seeing how you react to it, right? Could be anything. It could be, they succeed in some way and you get jealous and they can tell and that upsets them, vice versa. You can be really critical and judgmental of them and make snide comments, and it's very clear in the tonality of your voice that you're jealous or spiteful or hating. You could be the friend who says the hard thing and calls them out, and then they don't see the benefit in that, and they kind of just want to stick their head in the sand, and they don't want to be, they don't want to have to honestly look inside themselves. They just want to be, ignorant and blissful, right? There's a lot of different combinations here, but you'll always be able to figure it out if you look at who's doing the complaining and what they're complaining about, who's doing the cutting off, right? And if there's an extreme there, you probably have an answer already, right? If there's an extreme, if you're the one always getting dumped and you're the one always getting cut off, probably you're the issue, right? There might be one, person in a million who is just like, who knows, maybe they just have bad karma, but they're actually a really good person in this life. They just fucked up in a previous life. So all their relationships are just going to implode. I guess it's possible, right? But for the most part, if you're constantly getting dumped, there's probably an issue with you. And it seems to be a critical issue. You might have a lot of great things going for you, but this one issue is really, really, unfortunately, negatively impactful on your relationships and your friendships. So you need to get to fixing it. But yeah, so look at who's doing the complaining, who's doing the bitching and bringing up the problems, what they're actually evaluating or what they're saying is the problem, and if that's the truth. Look at who's consistently getting cut off. Are you the one cutting people off? Are people cutting you off? Or is it like a 50-50 mix? And then who's usually bringing more to the friendship? Who's the more generous one? Who's the more compassionate and kind one? Who's the more attentive one? Are you the friend who, like, for instance, my wife has a friend where my wife is the one on the phone listening for 3 hours and the other friend's always bitching. Well, clearly my wife is the more bringing more value to the table. Because she's the one pretty much playing therapist all the time. And I don't even know why she's friends with this other girl, right? So if that other girl, let's say, were to watch this video for some fucking reason and honestly evaluated the friendship, she would go, okay, you know what? I'm the one always calling and complaining and taking up her time. And all I do is talk about myself and I never really ask about her. And, I'm really rich, but always bitch and complain, right? That, they only have Gucci in this. Like, seriously, one of her complaints was she was on, like, vacation at some nice place, and they only had a couple luxury stores. That was her fucking complaint. Right. Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. Lack of gratitude. Yeah, entitlement to the fucking nth degree. And so many more issues than that, but that's just the starting point. Right. So she would go, okay. I'm the asshole. Right. Just fucking honest. You get the receipt. You are the asshole. Finger pointing at you. Okay, cool. What can I do about it? Right. That's the end point of this video. Right. What do you do about it? Well, if you're consistently not the problem, really, then you have a failure in choosing the right kind of friends. And if you're doing that, you either don't believe you deserve better, which is very powerful, or very possible. You can be a really high value person but not believe it. I know people like that. They don't have good standards for themselves, and so they allow themselves to get in bad friendships and relationships. Or you're a bad fucking judge of character. That's the other thing. You're just a horrible judge of character. And that also, you need to become less gullible and more smart and a little bit more ruthless with who you are spending time with, right? So you apply that to whatever degree the other people are the asshole. If you're the asshole, if you're the problem in your relationships and friendships, then stop being a fucking asshole, right? You need to look at the specifics of what you're doing wrong, which might not always be what they say, right? Because the other people still will have their biases and their misinterpretations and yeah, they're going to have their own bias. And so they're going to say it's this, but really it's this, right? So you need to take into account what they say and then also take into account what might be the truth. And then the best way you find out is you have you have a hypothesis. You know what? I need to change this or this. I'm going to try it. And then you see if you have less problems in the future. Right? The proof is in the pussy, right? That's how I always say that, right? When it comes to like dating and relationships, the proof is in the pussy. If girls are getting wet for you and they love you, you're doing something right. Friendships, the proof is in the prosperity, right? The proof is in the happiness. If friends are like enjoy being around you and they're happy, then the proof is there. So you have to look for the empirical data, right? And one of the best examples of this was a couple of years ago. I was in Romania and I made this group of friends on Dota, and then I found out that they actually lived in my city. And so I ended up hanging out with them, meeting with them, and was playing with them every day. And I started to get very involved with the group. But at the same time, I was going through a really, really hard time, right? I was in Ukraine during the war, pretty awful experience, got some PTSD from it, started to have a bunch of panic attacks and anxiety attacks and all sorts of other shit. And so I kind of lost my mind. And so I was going through a rough time. And if you've had really strong anxiety, you understand that sometimes you can be really irritable, and sometimes you're just really depressed, and a lot of bad shit can happen. So a few times while I was with this group, I kind of got irritated and maybe was a little bit rude in how I communicated, which I'll take responsibility for. But what ended up happening was one of the times I kind of was an asshole and I got called out for it, and I was like, hey, I'm sorry, da 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 da. And then not long after, one of the guys in the group kind of pretty much cut me off. And I was like, what the fuck, right? And the other guys were still being really nice to me, but they wouldn't address what was going on, right? So it was one of those situations where, like, they know what happened, but they don't have the balls to kind of, like, talk about it, but they still want to be friends with me, which I actually think is a really shitty thing to do. It kind of proves you're a pussy, right? And I'm not really interested in being friends with pussies. But when I ended up finding out the truth, because I didn't know the truth at first, right? I had to kind of do some digging, and then eventually someone was willing to confess it to me. Someone had the balls but I had to kind of corner them. And because I was just really curious, I was like, what the fuck? It kind of came out of nowhere. And it happened really after this event, right? Well, I ended up asking what was the problem specifically. And the first thing he brought, and it's always interesting, the first thing someone brings up. The first thing he actually brought up was not that moment where I thought the main problem was I was on voice chat and I kind of got a little bit anxious and kind of had a little bit of a thing and kind of like started yelling a little bit, which was unacceptable. But the first thing that he brought up that apparently was the issue was we played a private match of Dota. If you don't know what Dota is, it's League of Legends, but for actual adults, right? I'm already triggering some people. And so we played with each other. Usually we're always playing with each other in ranked matches, but we actually played against each other with each other. Well, I'm pretty fucking good. And I can consistently beat people of a higher rank than me, which then gives me the delusion that I'm worth this rank. I guess, we can have some debates there, but yeah. Anyways, this guy who was the one who actually kind of ended up cutting me off from the group, I kicked his ass. Like, I shit on him. And he was like a whole rank above me. Not just one star, but whole like medal. And I shit on him. And when we finished playing the games, I was having fun and I was just kind of talking shit. I was like, oh, what's up? Got you. But like having fun, right? And when I asked this other guy, like, who didn't want me to be in the group anymore, it was just, he was like, well, I'm not going to say who, but it was this. And I was like, I knew immediately who it was because I had shit on him. And I remember his attitude had changed after that game. I didn't notice it, but upon reflection, I was like, wait, actually, you're right. It was right after that. And then it was after that game when I had that moment on voice chat, I think, when I kind of like lost my shit. And that guy kind of got mad. He's like, hey, man, you got to chill out. And I was like, oh, yeah, I do. I'm being an asshole. Sorry about that. And then it was kind of just this weird, like, this guy really wouldn't talk to me that much anymore. I would still hang out with him sometimes, but like it was kind of like this kind of distancing. And then randomly one day, like, I wasn't in the Discord anymore. And I was like, what's going on? Like, because nothing happened after, right? It was kind of this thing that happened months before. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Like, he must have just decided one day, like, fuck me. And I was like, but that was the first thing this guy brought up. He was like, it was the private Dota game. And I was like, So on the surface, you have this like, okay, Hector might have been kind of an asshole in this 1 or 2 instances, but it was really only 1 or 2 instances, like honestly. Besides that, everything was great. But then this other thing, it was the private Dota match. I'm pretty convinced this guy literally got so mad that I made him my bitch in Dota. Like, that was the honest evaluation. And I was like, what a fucking faggot. Like, there is no other way for me to put it. Like, wow, he is a straight up faggot. Got mad that I fucked his ass up because we laned against each other and I shit on him. Don't play against me in mid. It's a bad idea, especially when I'm playing Necrophos. So, or Weaver. Like, I'm just going to shit on you. You're going to hate it. And so I was like, wow, okay, that was really, and it just made me look down on him. And I was like, okay, yeah, well, it's kind of like, and you get dumped by someone, you're like, you know what, I dodged a bullet there. Because not every rejection means you're the problem. But there still were some things I did wrong, right? I took full responsibility. It's like, yeah, I kind of like was a little bit here and here and a little bit there. Like, I could have been better, right? But it wasn't anything egregious, right? But at the end of the day, and then I think there were some other things that, like, we could go into more details. I think that maybe are even more deep psychologically. But it's not really worth going into this video. But I'm pretty sure I have some other ideas of what was going on. Basically, like, the group was kind of starting to like me a lot. It's a little bit complicated. But sounds, really narcissistic. But, I do this for a living. So I have a pretty good idea of why people do what they do. So, when that happens, you have to evaluate why you're being dumped or doing the dumping. Because you can do the dumping and be the asshole. You can be fucking, really out of line, right? You could be misinterpreting someone else and overly judging them and being too harsh with them. It's very, very possible. Right? Just because you're doing the dumping doesn't mean that, but a lot of times when you do the dumping, you feel in power. Right? And then when you're being dumped, it feels like you lost power. But it's not that linear. It's not that simple. There's a lot of nuances there. Right? You can I've used this example before. You can walk into a room and let's say 10 people are in the room and they're just like pieces of shit. Like, they're just bad people. And they don't like you. That's a fucking compliment. I would give you a thumbs up if they rejected you, because their rejection of you is proof that you're not a piece of shit. In some weird way, you can say that if you truly have good social skills, you can be diplomatic with everyone and da-da-da-da-da. And that has some merit. But for the most part, if pieces of shit don't like you, good job. Like, you should keep doing whatever you're doing. You're doing the right thing. It's like a metaphor you could use, like, demons don't like light, right? So if you are a beacon of light, they're going to be like, right? So a rejection is not always a sign that you did something wrong, but it doesn't mean that it's always a sign that you didn't do anything wrong either. Sometimes you are the asshole. And, is there an easy, like, ratio to give? Like, is it always 50-50? No. I mean, you could be 90-10 in either direction. You could just be an incorrigible fucking piece of shit. It's very possible, right? Or you could be really great. You just have one thing that's really wrong and you need to fix it, right? Like, for a long time, this bombasticism, this, loudmouth, I'm going to say what I want to say and be super honest and overly transparent sometimes, even when it's not asked for, I probably wasn't as refined as I should have been for a lot of my life. So, a lot of times I was a fucking asshole. And, I've gone to great lengths to learn how to maybe calibrate it, right? But I accept a certain range of error. And so you need to also, when you finally make decision time, you have to say, you know what, I realize that I have these flaws, but these are things that I'm willing to accept. But you need to make sure that you're willing to accept them because they're overall positives. Not because, I just like doing them. Because they're not like hobbies, right? They are personality traits that are going to affect others. And if they are negatively affecting others, but they don't have some sort of like kind of, Diogenes sort of like, I'm going to be an asshole and troll people, but it's a positive in the end because I'm actually helping them. Some sort of like tough love. If it's not one of those, then it's you just sticking to your biases, and you're not ready to change. And that's okay. Not everyone's ready to change everything, right? I'm clearly, I'm probably self-delusional about a lot of things, right? And I'm not willing to change a lot of things about myself, even though I should, right? But you want to be as ruthless as possible, because there will be nothing but positive changes if you are willing to face the fact that you're the asshole and make changes, or realize that you either are bad at judging who's assholes and then you're allowing them into your life, which is going to hurt you in the end. So you're either not judging them correctly, or the other one, like you don't believe you deserve better. In that case, then you have to believe that you deserve better, right? But here's the unfortunate part, and I'll say this as one last kind of cautionary, warning. Most of the advice out there, if you read most comments on videos about who's the asshole, almost every comment is like, yeah, everyone else in my life is the asshole. Because if you catch yourself just immediately saying that, that might be a sign that the opposite is true. Not necessarily, but it might be. Because it's impossible that no one's the asshole. Somebody is the asshole, right? So you might feel the urge to make yourself not the asshole. But you need to, it can be a pie chart. It can be, 60% you, 40% you, right? But you do need to really be realistic. And there's a high chance that it could be you. Just like I'm very, I tried to make a very objective case. Like I was wrong here when I wasn't wrong here. And then that person was wrong here, or this guy, really try to cut the pie chart as fairly as possible. And if you're going to have a bias, have more of a bias against yourself, because most people are going to be like, yeah, I deserve, right? Think of like the most stereotypical annoying ass fucking basic bitch, right? Like, I'm a queen, I deserve better, all the men in my life suck, right? But all the other dudes in it's not just women who do it, it's guys too, right? I mean, I get comments like this all the time. Women are going to take advantage of you, they just care if you're good looking or you're rich or da-da-da, fuck these hoes, OnlyFans detected, opinion rejected, just fucking retarded faggot shit, right? If you catch yourself on one of those extremes, you're probably the asshole, and you are very deep in self-delusion. So I advise a radical shift and test it, right? Test your changes and see if your life gets better. If it does, congratulations. If it doesn't, well, then you made a wrong move and you need to try a different direction, right? The proof is in the pussy and the proof is in the prosperity. So best of luck to you all. Love you. I've talked enough. Goodbye. Ciao.